let us go ahead and get started with our MPL Malaysia Season 16 Week 4 Team Power Rankings. And we're gonna start in a very similar way to how we did Week 2, which is basically the low-hanging fruit, the very obvious choice of putting SRG at number 1. This is going to be the easiest way to start these tier lists for a very long time. Because it really does not feel like anyone's gonna be dethroning them anytime soon. In the past, there would be situations where I might be able to put a team ahead of SRG in like the early game, for example, because they had always been known for being the weakest in the early game specifically, but were just so strong everywhere else that it more than made up for it. But it feels like recently, they've actually gotten better at early game too, right? So because of that, there is just no possible way I can put SRG OG anywhere else except for the top position. There really is just no other way for me to go about it. Judah points out that SRG was sus versus GamesMy, and yes, I will agree. The fact that SRG OG dropped the game against GMXK is unprecedented, right? It's not like SRG is invincible. There have been teams who have taken games off of SRG, but you would not expect that GMXK would be the one to do it. I attribute this to SRG. SRG was clearly experimenting with their draft, right? They had Dirov and Obsidia, which Kram has played Dirov before, but I don't really think Obsidia is a hero that's very suited for Innocent, right? Which is rare, because it feels like Innocent can just play anything, but it felt like Obsidia was not really the pick there. And even though Dirov was supposed to counter Esme is so strong right now that like, unless you are destroying her early, she will end up having more value than you later on in the game anyway. So I will agree that SRG was definitely not operating at full power in that game too, and there were definitely extenuating circumstances that did not allow them to play as good as they normally would. But I mean, we still cannot deny that SRG OG is the strongest team in every phase of the game in MPL Malaysia. There is just no beating them if they're actually locked in. You can tell from the fact that after they lost game 2, they decided, okay, no more messing around in game 3 and just destroy GMXK, right? They were experimenting. Like, it's very simple to see. But at the same time, we have to give proper props to GMXK, right? Because even if SRG is messing around, right? Even if SRG is messing around a little bit, it is not easy to beat them, right? There's very few teams that can actually beat SRG even when they are messing around a little bit. So the fact that GMXK was able to do so makes you think, okay, maybe this team has more potential than we initially gave them credit for. Darren says he heard it was a wrong pick. I have not heard that. I will need to see whether or not that is the case, but I do think that SRG wasn't operating at full power in that game too, and then when they actually decided to lock in, you know, they performed as usual, right? So they're still the strongest team for sure, but we gotta give kudos to GMXK. Just the fact that they were able to take a game off of SRG, even if it was a wrong pick, or like they messed up, or they were experimenting, or anything like that. The fact that they were able to do so is already really, really impressive, alright? So next up, let's see. Okay, Nash brought up an interesting topic there. As a Todak fan, I'm still curious, what is the main reason the team failed to perform this season? Is it because of macro or micro, the coach, or their confidence? I still can't understand. Alright. To answer Nash's question, let's do Todak next. And this does not really reflect just yet of where Todak is going to end up once this tier list is completed. Right now, they're definitely behind SRG in every aspect, right? I can tell you right now, even before I've started ranking all of the other teams, Todak is going to be very low on this list. Kai says Todak is second. Nice. Yes, they're second right now, but they're also technically last. So Nash asked, what is the main reason the team is failing to perform? You know, is it because of micro? Is it because of the coach? Is it because of confidence? I'm gonna tell you right now, it is all of them. Actually, just straight up, every issue under the sun. If a team has encountered a problem that allowed them, that made it so that like they didn't perform in MPL, throughout MPL's history, if you take every single reason that a team has failed to perform, every single one in the history of MPL, Todak is facing all of them at the same time. I'm gonna say right now, this is absolutely the worst a team has performed in MPL. And yes, I am including Ocean Black. And some people might ask, no, they can't be worse than Ocean Black. You know, like Todak at least won a series, right? Sorry, Ocean Black. But here's the difference, right? Here's the difference. And Team Secret? Close. They're close to Team Secret. But the difference is, in the case of Ocean Black, in the case of Team Secret, the players were trying. The team was trying, alright? Ocean Black did not play well, but you can attribute it to the players being extremely inexperienced and just generally not ready as an organization for MPL. Team Secret just faced a lot of really unlucky things at the same time, right? Their players were not the quality they were hoping for. Remember, the coach had to play several games together with them, and they still tried. Todak is not trying. And that is going to be like a hot take of the day right there, because everyone's going to say, oh, every MPL team tries, right? Doesn't matter how bad they're playing, every MPL team tries, right? And I would have agreed, you know, even Ocean Black, even Team Secret, who went entire seasons without winning a single game, they tried. I don't feel like Todak is trying. Also, excuse all the sniffling, my nose is being a bit sus today, but yes. So, the players are skilled, they are experienced. Most of them are MPL veterans. A lot of us came into this season with the expectation that Todak should perform really well. Especially when we look at how well they performed last season before the Gebe Magma situation. But everything just fell into shit. You can see that the players have the mechanics. Yes. And honestly, Coach Nafari is trying his best with the drafts. I really don't have a lot of issue with the Todak drafts themselves. Right? Obviously, they're not perfect either, but they're perfectly workable. Right? Any other team given those same drafts would be able to perform. But Todak isn't. Even though they should be. And that is just the worst thing. Because this is the sign of a team that has already given up. If you ask me, it looks like Todak has already given up. And I wouldn't even be surprised if that actually was the truth. Because these players, these 5 individuals on the stage, are not trying to play together. This is the worst case of coordination I have ever seen, because it is not even a lack of coordination. It's not even a lack of communication. We've seen that from other teams. Again, if we bring up things like Ocean Black, right? They're obviously trying to communicate, but they don't have the experience or like the shot calling to really be able to execute on it. Todak should be able to do that. They have players that should be able to shot call, should be able to identify when situations are going bad, and should have the skills to be able to play off of it. So the only logical explanation for the situation this team is in is that they are purposefully not communicating. It almost feels like the players are trying to grief each other. That is the issue right now. It's not that the team is bad because like, of some kind of extenuating circumstance, it feels like they're straight up sabotaging themselves a lot of the time. Because they're not trying. You look at the way Todak takes team fights right now. You look at the way the players position. And it feels like they're not talking to each other. The players are fudging sitting next to each other and they're communicating worse than a couple in a long distance relationship. It's like they are not telling each other anything. And you just have 5 people on that stage trying to win the game by themselves. Every single time. It is really, really bad. And like normally I would talk about like, is this team strong early, mid, late? No, Todak's just bad right now. I'm gonna say right now, I'm gonna call it right now, Todak is last place. Todak is 100% last place on this list by the time this power ranking is complete. That is like what I am going to be saying straight away. Also, hello to ICGX and Kuruel who came in during my Todak rant. I feel very strongly about this because I am just straight up disappointed. This is a legacy organization full of veteran players and they're playing MPL like they don't give a shit. It's so disappointing coming from me. I 100% expect Todak to be last place. I'm gonna say that I'm pretty sure these two teams are going to be the sheer opposites. Gebe and Magma effect. Dude, at least Gebe and Magma were trying. Gebe and Magma made like, okay, I won't even call out Magma too much. Gebe was making a lot of mistakes. But dude was trying, you know, dude was actually trying to play the game properly. He was just not doing a good job at it. This is like another level of the spectrum. They're just not even trying. They're just not even bothering at this point, and it makes me really, really annoyed. So yeah, let's move on to another team, and let's start off with Arrow. So Arrow is almost 100%, like somewhere in the middle. So right now we have teams among like the spectrum of the list. SRG is definitely number 1. Todak is definitely last place. Arrow is somewhere in the center, right? So we're not gonna see too much variation in terms of who's stronger or weaker in the early, mid, and late game right now because I'm pretty sure all of these teams are like perfectly straight lines currently. Let's talk a little bit about Arrow. And let's specifically talk about the addition of Panda, alright? So if you guys remember, Arrow Esports got Panda, not the PH Coach Panda, our local Panda, this Panda with the glasses. And when he came in before week 4, a lot of us were wondering, okay, is he going to work out like properly with the squad, right? And the biggest issue that I felt like Arrow Esports was mainly encountering before all of this is that like the players have potential, but it didn't feel like the drafts were really being like picked up appropriately for them. Okay, this draft is a little bit cut off, but we could still see like Arrow. I personally feel like ever since Panda came in, the drafts have made a little bit more sense. Right? Because before this, I feel like Arrow stuck to a very like meta perspective. You know? I feel like the Arrow Esports drafting style before this was very, very meta and a little bit too honest. Which doesn't really work because Arrow Esports is not the most honest team. And that's not a bad thing. If I say that about a person, it's a bad thing. But in the case of like an MPL team, that's not actually a bad thing, right? You want to be a little bit dishonest with the way you approach drafts, with the way you play the game. And I do feel like their previous drafts were a little bit too honest a lot of the time, right? And now, I don't want to straight up blame Coach Tazi. Is Arrow the one that had a female coach? Yes. And people are probably going to call me out straight away for being like, oh, he's talking bad about a female coach. I'm going to be honest, I do feel like there were some issues with the way that Coach Tazi was drafting for Arrow because it was a bit too honest. And remember how there was a quote from one of the players that said like she was attempting to expand the players' hero pools with the drafts? I think that's a respectable thing to do. But you also, as a coach, need to understand to what extent you can push it. Arrow looked very uncomfortable before this. And I wish we got one more game with Arrow this, because like in week 4 we only had one Arrow game, which was versus CG, which they did win. But we only got one game. So I cannot 100% cement this hypothesis just yet. But I do also think that the fact they were able to take down CG is actually a really, really good sign. Again, the first couple weeks of MPL, the issue we had with Arrow was mainly draft and identity, which are a little bit correlated because your identity kind of dictates the style of drafting you want to go for. And it didn't seem very clear that they knew what they wanted at the time yet. I think that their week 4 draft looked cleaner, but that could also be biased because like it was the actual like positive result, right? So that's why I really wish we had a second match of Arrow for me to be very sure. Obviously we will have that next week, but that'll be after the power ranking. But I will say, Arrow looks a little closer to their previous form. That's for sure, right? They are still one of the stronger early game teams. I think that Arrow is more of a early to mid game team, but their late game is not bad as well. I would say they're one of the more balanced squads in MPL, but because of that, they're generally quite dependent on getting the correct draft. So if they're able to remain consistent in this way, then that's actually a really good sign going forward. Again, just the fact that they were able to take down CG Esports, who I ranked as second strongest team in the league after week 2, is actually a big deal, right? Because if Arrow was still playing and drafting the same way they were in these first 3 weeks, I can 100% say they should not have beaten CG. The fact that they were able to beat a team like CG, who is known to be very smart with their shot calling, who has very strong macro, is already a strong indication that something has shifted. And we will see whether or not that trend continues onwards, but for now, I can quite safely say that Arrow looks better than they did before. Which is good, because I think I had Arrow in like, what, 7th, 8th place in the list before this? They've definitely moved up a few spots, I will say. Alright, now, let us do a little bit of comparison. CG Esports. This is the team that I ranked second during my week 2 power ranking, and I firmly placed them as a late game team. And that's quite rare, because a lot of the time MPL teams are more early mid game teams, right? Or mid game teams in general, right? It's very rare we have a team that specializes in late game. Again, I think that CG Esports has proven their macro is really good. Their shot calling is really clean. But they are not perfect. Surprisingly, CG Esports is also a little bit dependent on having the correct drafts. Valence makes strong calls, but he needs to have the right pick-off hero. Chiku is actually somewhat dependent on some of his more cheesy picks. That's why he likes going for Odette as often as he does. Gary, honestly, popping off. I think Gary is doing a great job. Yetri is also doing a great job, which is great, especially in a EXP lane focused meta. Amzik has been doing a very solid job, but we haven't really gotten to see the extent of his hero pool yet. He played Ruby Gold for the first time last week, which I believe was in this game. This is cut off. I don't think you guys... Was it in this game? No, it was against Todak. It was against Todak. Yeah, they played Ruby in the second game. Again, it's cut off, so you guys can't see it. But they played Ruby Gold in the second game, and they were actually losing early to Todak, right? Because Zayed was on Fanny, so he was actually kind of popping off. So I was a little worried about whether or not Amzik really had what it takes to play like fighter gold lane. Is his hero pool really like going to be a big issue? But he actually did lock in once we got into the later stages. He actually made some pretty solid Ruby plays once we got into the late game. So this just further cements my opinion that CG Esports is a late game team. So they're definitely stronger than the rest late game, but not quite as strong as SRG, because I'm pretty sure SRG is going to be #1 in everything. Mid game, when compared with Arrow, is probably slightly more conditional, I will say right now. I will say their mid game is probably a little more conditional. They're definitely weaker early. Aero Esports has a stronger early game than CG Esports, I will say for sure, 100%. Mid game is highly dependent on draft though. That's the difficult part. That is the tricky part right now. But if you ask me personally right now, I do think that CG is a little bit more stable mid. If Aero gets a really strong lead, then of course they will control mid. But in terms of consistency, I still do like the way CG plays the map a little more overall. And personally, I want to rank them higher than Aero. I still think they're stronger than Aero in general, until I can see a little bit more proof from Aero. So I will put CG ahead for now in mid and put them overall stronger than Aero. Moving on. Next we have GMX Kelantan. Now this is the team that I rated as last in week 2. And I think a lot of us can agree that they were definitely deserving of being in last place after week 2. But I can quite safely say now that they are not last place. Because Todak is last place. For sure. Now, GMXK makes this list a little bit difficult to work with because they took a game off of SRG OG. And like I explained to you guys earlier, before we started doing the rating, I think that a lot of it is because SRG probably messed around a little bit in game 2, played heroes they weren't the most comfortable on, while GMX went full comfort, right? If we look at the drafts once again, and again I know this is cut off for you guys, but in game 2 we had the Dirov and the Obsidia along with Zusin and Gatot. I already see a bit of an issue in terms of the frontline being not that secure, because normally you want to have double frontline. You want one diver frontline, you want one protective frontline, and you only have one Gatot to fulfill both roles. Dirov is just not tanky enough to do that. That's already kind of an issue. And their team fighting is very lacking as well. A lot of these heroes are very single target. The main damage, which is Dirov and Obsidia, is very single target, and Joy needs to be able to get in with space. So already, I feel like that SRG's draft was not the most comfortable in this situation. And then Maima was on a very comfortable pick, which was the Eve. And MQT is making me think that Gold Lane Kimmy is actually good. I'm going to say right now. Like, I did not think that Gold Lane Kimmy was good. I felt like it was kind of a waste of the hero's potential because mid Kimmy is just generally more effective. But MQT is making me change my mind a little bit. MQT plays a mean Gold Lane Kimmy. But Jaja on the Lancelot is actually insane. I'm gonna say right now, I feel like Jaja on the Lancelot is actually really, really good. Right? We already knew that Jaja was a new player that a lot of teams were actually like eyeing to recruit, and he said no to a lot of them. And we can kind of see why. His mechanics are really intense. So I can say for sure that GMX is stronger than Todak. Like, just straight up. They're just straight up more consistent than Todak in every way. The question is, are they better than others? I don't think their early game is particularly strong. I also don't think their mid game is particularly strong. I actually think their late game is something that is worth considering a little bit. I do think that Aero is probably just still a little better in general, because GMX were able to take the victory from SRG, yes, but I think that was a case of literally all of the planets aligning for them. Because under any other circumstance, I don't think they should have gotten that win. I feel I really hate saying this for any MPL team, but genuinely I do think that that victory was a little bit of a fluke. A tiny bit of a fluke. It was a tiny fluke, but also deserved fluke, because GMX genuinely played a great game, that one. Should put GMXK above Aero and overall just to spite people? Nah, because like I don't think Aero, like right now I only have 5 teams on the board. I'm pretty sure Aero is going to be higher than this. So I can't exactly like do this. I don't think I can do this because I don't really think that GMX is that high up. But I will consider this a little bit later. Once we have more teams onto the list, then we might be able to do a little bit of rearranging depending on how things go. But right now, I'm gonna put GMX here, like this. And then later we will revisit them. Because this is a team that has potential. They just need the right hero picks. And honestly, they have the confidence. I like the confidence, right? The fact that they were able to stand out to SRG and just not like sit back and let themselves get steamrolled is really solid. Most teams win because of draft. Yeah, that is kind of the name of the game right now. And it's not just even the draft alone. You need everything to kind of work together in tandem. That's why I do think that we're in a really interesting state of the meta right now. You know? You get really punished if you don't play a balanced game properly. Alright, next up, let us talk about our good old homeboys. And I am going to say this right now. I personally believe that Homeboys is currently number 2. Based off of their recent performance, and even before I rate them in terms of like early, mid, and late game, I genuinely think right now, Homeboys is the second strongest team in the league. And all of that purely from Daniel's addition and what he has brought to the team. Genuinely, massive hyper impact. It's actually insane how much impact this one man has brought. And I won't attribute it all to Daniel either, right? Daniel's great, but the reason why his impact has been so big is because he fills in a particular niche that the rest of the Homeboys players have been looking for and are known to work well with, right? So let's talk a little bit about Homeboys. Daniel obviously has been a star, you know, damn Daniel, right? His show has been strong, but he has proven that he is not a one-trick pony. He has played various different roam heroes. He's played pick-off like Cho, even Kaja, right? He's played Khalid. You know, it feels like he's very, very solid. His shot calling is great. His movements are aggressive. And if you remember, last season, Homeboys, when they played with Ivan and Vel, were a very aggressive pick-off style team. Izanami, as a mid laner, has always historically performed the best in MPL when he's been paired up with a highly aggressive roamer, right? So Izanami with Daniel is a really good fit. Amal has been doing an ridiculously good job. I did not think that Amal would be able to return to this level of gameplay after his kind of drop off the last few seasons. So glad he has proven me wrong. Reza as well has been a great breath of fresh air. And all of these players work super well with an aggressive style of movement across the map. Could their macros still use some work? Yes. You know? Could their flexibility still use a little bit of work? Yes. But they have found their identity. And they know how to draft and play for that identity. And most of the players here have a really strong hero pool overall. They are the pinnacle, the epitome of an early mid-game draft. You know, I think they are one of the best examples of the mishmash of Malaysian-Indonesian gameplay of being aggressive and going off of kills to create space. The only point of the game that I would put CG above them is late, because CG plays a really mean late game. But this means that in general, yes, Judah, I will answer your question now. I do think they are better than CG. I actually do. Because if we recall from the games that we saw in week 4, games that we saw in week 3 and week 4, CG did actually lose 2 matches. Of course, one of those was to SRG. So that's a little bit unfair to really say. And they did technically take a game off of SRG as well. But I think, based on what I have seen, Homeboys deserves the second spot. Genuinely. And I am actually really surprised that they have managed to do this. Because throughout the first half of the season, I was convinced that we were not going to see a return to form from Homeboys. And when they got a new roamer, I did not think that one person could make enough of a difference. And yet, he has. And yet that one change is all it took. Goes to show, doesn't it? Goes to show anything can happen. It's actually insane. So yes, I will put Homeboys in second place. That is my call right now. I think CG is still probably third. So this is my current top 3, which means that Vamos has been knocked out of top 3, unfortunately. But I think we all knew that was going to happen at some point. Alright, next up, let us talk about Monster Vicious. What matches did Monster Vicious play? They won 2-0 versus Untitled, and then they lost 2-0 against Homeboys. Monster Vicious is solid, but they are unfortunately still very mid-game focused, I will say. I will say that Monster Vicious is still like incredibly mid-game focused. Mid-game is their strongest point, for sure. I will put them like around here. They're very comparable to Homeboys when it comes to like just mid-game power spike. But they're a little lacking everywhere else, I will say. Their early game is not bad. I would actually put their early game above CG, because CG does feel a little bit lackluster early, which is a bit sad because I expected Balance to be a little bit more effective overall. But then, so Monster Vicious was the team that made the week 2 power ranking really confusing, because I had to put them like super far back when it came to like just late game gameplay. I will say that out of every marksman, out of every goal laner in the league, Ruff looks the best when it comes to fighter goal lane. Just straight up. I personally think when it comes to fighter goal lane, Ruff might actually outperform Innocent a lot of the time. Because Ruff just likes being aggro, you know? He likes standing in front. He likes whacking people real hard. In fact, a lot of the issues that MV has been having in their lifetime is because Ruff keeps getting caught out from being too far forward. If you guys remember, I considered Ruff as kind of the weak point of Monster Vicious for a very long time, because it just didn't feel like he was very good at clutching out the late game, right, as a marksman. But every single time he has played fighter goal lane, especially on like Esmeralda, dude just fudging destroys. Dude is roaming to the other side of the map at the 5-minute mark, you know? Dude's already participating in turtle fights at the very beginning of the game. That dude, that guy was made to play fudging fighter gold lane. Chiku Jr. for a reason. Even Chiku doesn't play like that. That's a very like Ruff specific thing, right? That's why like the early and mid game is very solid, because like when they play those kinds of drafts, it works. It suits them incredibly well. But then late game, it just kind of falls off. I think I'm still gonna put them like pretty low late actually. Would they be this far? I think GMXK really did impress me. GMX did actually really impress me, like quite a lot. You know what? I might actually do this. Hold on. We will once again revisit this in a moment, but is Arrow's late game better than what MV? Yeah, I think so. I think Kusei is actually just a little bit more like consistent. But MV did also hold out late game very well. Like when they went up against Homeboys. Actually, no, not really. Yeah, this makes sense to me. This makes sense to me. So if we consider all of this, MV once again makes my life very difficult. I'm gonna put them here. Because normally when I do these rankings, if a team is stronger than another team in 2 categories, I would normally put them above. Which technically means if MV is ahead of CG in 2 categories, they should be above CG. But then you also have to look at it and realize that they are behind Aero in 2 categories. So this is the exact same issue I had in week 2 when I was positioning MV, but I'm gonna put them here. I think they are probably a little less consistent than Aero. When it comes to mid-game, MV is 100% stronger than Aero. But then when it comes to like a general like gameplay approach, I think that Aero is better, especially if they can continue locking in terms of their draft for Aero, I mean. So yeah, I think this is a good place to put MV. Next up would be Team Ray, but Nash earlier asked how about Untitled. So let's talk about Untitled first. Because, as we all know, this was our dark horse of Season 15, right? Untitled. DX Seoul. The team that surprised everyone and captured the hearts of the nation in their first season. So, I remember that during week 2 when I was talking about Untitled, I was basically mentioning how they were probably overthinking their draft a little bit, and that's probably why they didn't look very stable after the patch drop. Now that we are in week 4, I can say 100% that is exactly what happened. I can almost 100% guarantee that is exactly what happened to Untitled. They started overthinking the draft and gameplay after the patch drop. They tried completely changing the way they approached the game, which was not a good idea, because as most teams figured out, the patch didn't actually change all that much. You still played the game generally the same. But Untitled leaned way too hard into trying new stuff, which caused them to fall off really hard in week 2. And I think that as a result of that big fall off in week 2, they started getting pressured. They started overthinking the draft even more, and it became a downward spiral. Right? It's a very similar situation to what happened with Vamos last season, because they lost against SRG in the very first game of the season and they just never recovered. I think Untitled is going through a very similar situation where they leaned too hard and overthought the patch in week 2 so much that it affected them heavily afterwards. And it's somewhat understandable as well, because you still have to remember this is only the team's 2nd season in MPL. Right? They're still very new players. It's understandable that some of that inexperience would result in this kind of issue. Unfortunately, I feel like the coach has not been doing the best job of reeling them in either, which is a bit sad because I had so much praise for Coach Tio last season. Siska is so good. Siska is like the only player that is still consistently performing no matter the situation. Even when the rest of Untitled is throwing or messing up, Siska is trying to save every single fudging game. This boy, this kid right here has my respect. Kevin is making a lot of blunders. Lots of blunders. He needs to lock that in. He needs to figure that out. Because I remember he got like he got a lot better once he qualified to playoffs last season. I don't think he has enough leeway to do that. He needs to get better now. Snom is still okay. Snom still does his job. SkyZ, very hero dependent. He needs space, he needs the right pick to be able to like start clutching out late game. Rasi is okay sometimes, not okay other times. Again, kind of dependent on hero picks. He needs to not jump forward too far as well. Untitled has always been very good at scrappy team fights, right? DXS was specialized in scrappy team fighting. And I think because they've lost some confidence and they've become a little bit frazzled in terms of team play and communication, that particular playstyle is the most vulnerable to messing up. And that's probably what has been happening to Untitled this season. Unfortunately, I really cannot say where I think Untitled is strongest right now. Okay, so they lost 2-0 to MV, and then they won 2-0 against Ray. The issue is, I don't really remember how that happened. I actually do not remember how this match went. You know what? Let's go and watch my recap. Let's go watch my recap to try and remember what happened in Untitled's matches. Where are the Untitled matches? Untitled MV. Okay, so this was a close match. This was actually a very, very close match between Untitled and MV, so it was like very, very back and forth. We could start seeing that Untitled was actually doing a little bit better, but then in game 2 they just got dumpstered, so that's a bit unfortunate. And wow, I actually skipped perfectly to the other Untitled game. So here, yeah, so this was the game where Team Ray tried playing double fighter side lane, which did not work. Like, Jome did not look very comfortable, and Error 404 unfortunately didn't really feel like he performed. And then in game 2... Yeah, okay, so basically what happened is that Untitled has started trying to go back to like their previous style. Note that Siska was given Arlet very early and very often in the draft, even though it's a hero that's supposed to be fairly easily countered. And it still worked, right? So I think they're trying to go back a little bit to their previous style of gameplay. And if they're able to succeed in doing that, we might see a bit of a revitalization of Untitled. But I'm also worried that it might be too late in the season for it to actually mean anything. Untitled is a very snowball-oriented team. Their late game is solid, but heavily depends on their early and mid game. I would still say that mid game is probably where they are generally strongest. I'll put them ahead of Arrow in the mid game. And then their late game is probably here. I do think that they're generally a little more consistent than GMX overall. You know what? No, I'm gonna put Arrow ahead of them. I think that if Arrow gets the correct like situations, they are probably a little stronger in terms of like direct team fighting. And then early game Untitled is a little inconsistent. Maybe somewhere around here. No, around here. Yeah, I think Untitled is the type of team that gets better the longer the game goes, right? It's very similar to last season. DXS was always the team that performed when they were pushed against a corner. So I think this makes sense. Which also means that unfortunately they're probably still down here. But they have the potential to get better. I think that Untitled has the potential to start performing a little better. But I need to actually see that happen before I can tangibly put it on the ranking. So for now, I think this is a fair place to put them. Unfortunately, it's not where they would like to be, but I think this is an okay place to put them. Alright, next up, Team Ray is a team that I find a little disappointing, I will say. Looking at their matches, they lost... Yeah, they're the team that lost 2-0 to Untitled. And then the week before, they lost 2-0 to CG and MV as well. The thing is, Team Ray is also lacking a bit of an identity. The problem is the only identity that you can kind of like know this team for is they like to hyper funnel into Jome. And then when Error 404 came in, they tried to switch the hyper funnel to Error 404, which did not work. They definitely felt a little bit more solid when Dusk was around because he made it easier to hyper funnel into Jome. But once teams start figuring out that strategy, then they start dropping off. It feels like it's the same thing for Ray every season, actually, now that I think about it. It feels like this is a very similar story to what happens to Team Ray every single season. Every single season, Team Ray starts off the season fairly strong, but then teams realize that they only play like one style, figure out how to easily counter it, and then Team Ray just drop off the map. That's the whole reason why they never make it into playoffs. They only perform well when teams don't know what to expect. And they're just not like adapting particularly good either. I am a little bit disappointed overall with how Team Ray has been playing. I just don't think they've been doing a very good job. Early game is generally a little lacking. Like, I really wish that Nova was more aggressive on the map. It really does not feel like he's aggressive enough on the map a lot of the time. Does a good job of holding. Dur needs to stop getting caught out of position. Zome needs time. ZQT's presence doesn't feel like strong enough. Yeah, this is I think Team Ray is also a bit of a late game team, but they are not. Honestly, I'm gonna put them here, actually. I think I might have to... Are they behind GMXK? Am I ranking them behind GMXK? I just put them behind GMXK in 2 categories. Dude, they might be behind GMXK. Holy shit. Cause like, I really have started like thinking GMXK has more potential than we expect after they took a game off of SRG. Again, there were a lot of circumstances surrounding that victory, but it doesn't deny the fact they got the victory. There's not a lot of teams that can do that, even against an SRG who isn't performing at top power. But is Team Ray lower than GMX? Judah says nah, they are better than Games My. Games My late game is very solid. Okay, hold on. Team Ray's late game is still one of the stronger points of their gameplay. I will probably put them above Arrow. Like this maybe. This might make more sense. Unfortunately, both these teams are a little bit draft dependent and a little bit momentum dependent. This might make sense. Untitled early game is a little more active than Ray, and Ray definitely has a more active early game than Games My. Untitled mid game is solid. Team Ray's mid game is dependent. But yeah, they are. Yeah, you're right. They are probably still a little bit better than Games My for now. Yeah, they're probably still a bit better than Games My for now. But not by much. Which is not a good sign. Definitely not a good sign for Team Ray. Hello, Anti-Fear. You don't see your name as the number 1. I'll remember to put you up there later. Alright, last team. Vamos. So, I put Vamos in my top 3 of week 2. I actually respected the fact that they identified what they wanted to do and that they played for it. They only had 2 matches last week, which does make my job a little bit difficult, especially since one of them was versus SRG. And I believe SRG didn't have a lot of difficulty against them either. I've almost put up an okay fight, but still generally kind of lacking. I will say they're definitely not top 3 anymore. They were able to win against Untitled 2-0, but that was when Untitled was also in like a really big mess. Vamos is still very early game team, very early mid game team, kind of a classic MY style kind of gameplay. So early game is definitely their strongest point. I will put them all the way up here. Are they stronger than Arrow when it comes to early game? Let's see, let me think. Arrow... Yeah, Arrow is very aggressive early in general as a team. Vamos is a little bit more aggressive independently. I'd say Vamos is more aggressive than Arrow in their early game. Their mid game is also pretty strong. It's one of their more stable times, but we have a lot of mid-game teams. Right now, this season, there's a lot of mid-game teams, so it's a little bit difficult to put Vamos like particularly high up. I'll put them between Arrow and Untitled, I think. And then late game becomes a little bit more not too sure. I think they're still very, very solid late game. But it's not a particularly memorable phase of the game for me because it feels like the game usually ends before it gets to late game when it comes to Vamos. They either win early or they lose early, right? So I don't have a lot of sample size in terms of Team Vamos late game to figure out. Judah also said earlier, I feel Games My Draft is easy to read, but Team Ray is more unpredictable because of Jome. Yeah, but I feel like Jome has also been having difficulty keeping up. I think the space that his team has been creating for him has not been enough. Personally, I would put Vamos here. I do think that Arrow has gotten a lot better in this past week alone. Yeah, I wish I had like at least one more match of Vamos. We only had 2 matches of Vamos throughout week 3 and 4. They still got 3 more matches after. They played most of their games. Yeah, they played 4 matches in the first 2 weeks. That's why they had so few matches now. That does make my job a little bit difficult. SRG won against them fairly easily as well. So again, it's a situation of like, for Vamos, they either win early or they lose early. I really don't know where to put them when it comes to the late game. I feel like Sky Z actually outperforms when it comes to late game. So I might put them like here-ish. Okay, let's swap Team Ray and Games My around so that they are just generally like a little more consistent. Jome really locks in once you get into the late game, so I can actually put them ahead of Vamos even. Their late game should be better than Untitled considering they did win against them and one of them was a late game. Okay, so here is how I interpret this right there, and I know the game you're talking about. It is this match right here. The one where Vamos won the game versus Untitled in 25 minutes. Now you might consider this as Vamos being stronger late game because we obviously went to late game and Vamos won. But I actually think I actually think that this is an indication that their late game is not as good. Because if their late game was better, it should not have taken this long. You have to remember, like Darren pointed out, and like we can see here, this was a double fighter side lane comp from Team Vamos, right? This is not designed to be a late game comp. This is actually designed to be a comp that wins out earlier in the game. So personally, I feel like this is an indication that Vamos' late game is not quite as solid because Untitled was able to drag it out that long. Right? Untitled was able to like lock themselves into the game long enough to drag it out to 25 minutes. Vamos did still win in the end though, that is the truth. But that is only a single game, right? That's like the only Vamos game that has gone that late. All of the other games have ended like before the 17-minute mark. I guess their late game is not bad though. It does depend on the draft that they got. It doesn't feel right though to have Vamos this high up late game. They didn't really win early. Yeah, thinking about it, Untitled has a really aggressive early, now that I think about it. Oh, I need to rearrange some things. Ah, fine. Okay, hold on. We're gonna rearrange a few things. It still doesn't really feel right to have Vamos this high up though. I feel like I can put them like here-ish. The problem is Untitled is a bit inconsistent. That's always the issue, right? When teams are inconsistent. That's what always makes like these ratings particularly difficult. Vamos is better. Fight me. There it says. Wow, okay, you feel very strongly about that, I see. I will admit, maybe I am letting some of the old Vamos bias play a role here, because Vamos has always been an early to mid game team. But I cannot deny that they have been doing better late. Ever since Nets left. Judat feels that Vamos should be in the middle. Technically they are. I have them like rated 5th right now. Overall. And in late. SRG won against Vamos because Gojis forgot to bring his bag to lock cram. Yeah, that's true actually. That is true. That is actually true. But this is a little tricky. This is we're having a little bit of difficulty coming to a consensus, aren't we? There are going to be so many long gaps of silence in this last ranking once I get into posting the video, because I'm not gonna be. You know what? I'm gonna write. Vamos rating has a lot of pauses. Let's see if I feel hardworking enough to cut those out tomorrow. Vamos being an early and late game team, huh? Kind of weird. Actually, it's not that weird because It actually isn't that weird thinking about it because almost every MPL MY team sucks at late game. The reason why okay, now that I think about it, the reason why I feel like it's weird for Vamos to be this high up is because normally most teams would not be worse than Vamos when it comes to late game. But this season, a lot of teams are mid-game, and a lot of teams are inconsistent. So Darren might not be wrong. Darren might actually not be wrong when we say that Vamos is the stronger late game team. Oh man, that's weird. You know what? Yeah, fudge it. I think this might be it. I think this might actually be the play. This might actually be the final ranking right here, boyos. What do you guys think? What is everyone's thoughts? I'm gonna quickly go through and review it one more time. SRG is strongest, Homeboys is early mid team, but their late game is also very solid, only really beaten out by CG's macro. MV has the strongest mid game team fighting still. Arrow has started popping off in terms of early game, but kind of drop off the later the game goes, which makes sense. Vamos has a strong early aggression, becomes a little more inconsistent mid, but is actually one of the teams that can hold late game a little better than most, which makes sense. Untitled is overall fairly inconsistent. Early's not bad. They're good when pushed against a wall though, so that makes sense. CG still first in the table. No, they're third. Like they're literally behind Homeboys. Team Ray has dropped off in general, became a little bit too predictable with their gameplay style. Can still be quite strong when they lock in late game, but otherwise is not looking too good right now. GMXK as well did a good job when it came to late. If they actually get the farm, I would actually, yeah, I can actually put them ahead of, you know what, maybe that's a bit high. Let's put Arrow above GMXK. I think that's fair. MV is all the way back here. CG is also a little bit weaker. They don't really do a lot when it comes to early game, and Todak is just generally bad. I think this is my power ranking. I think I can say this is probably my power ranking. This makes sense. This looks correct to me. Oh, the current MPL table? Yes, they're still first. Because they still were the team that played the most games, like, out of everyone. Who won the most games out of everyone as well. It's a quantity thing. I was like, hold on. If we look at how many games they've played, CG has played 7 games. SRG has played 6. And if SRG gets another 2-0, then they'll be 18. So they'll be number 1. In general, almost every other team has played 6 games, if you notice, right? The only teams that have played 7 games are CG and Todak, who is at the bottom. So Todak is very much bye-bye. But yeah, CG is still on top because like they got so many victories early on. But I get the feeling they're gonna be overtaken fairly soon. I'm still pretty sure they're quite safe in top 3 at least. But yeah, I've never done these tier lists based on MPL rating after all. No point doing them if I'm just gonna follow the MPL rating, right? Here we are trying to dictate, we are trying to figure out the true strength of these teams if we take out all the extra stuff. So yeah, I think this is probably my final power ranking for week 4 right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this. I'm gonna go ahead and post this tomorrow.